Seji, and welcome to another episode of A Book Chat with. Today I have the pleasure of being here with Megan Giddings, whose debut novel, Lakewood, is coming out on the 24th of March. Hello Megan, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am good, thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on. I'm so happy for you to be here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Me too. So, would you like to tell me a bit about yourself?
Ooh, professional or personal? Or a little bit of column A and column B?
Column B, whatever you like.
Um, let's see. I'm currently living in Indiana, where I got my MFA degree in fiction. And I've been, right after I graduated my MFA, and I had started Lakewood in the program in a novel writing workshop, and then it kept changing and changing. And then I just stayed up here. My partner, he is still, he got a job here he really likes, so he ended up staying here. But it also led to me working a lot of different jobs, from being a social media manager to just a lot of odd jobs so I could find the time to write, which I think helped my writing and also was very stressful. So now that I'm just adjuncting, it feels weirdly like a relief to only have a few jobs rather than many different things. What else about me? This is going to be something I wake up and be like, yeah, there are so many interesting things about me. But it's one of those questions that when someone asks, it's like, there is nothing interesting about me at all.
I know exactly what you mean. I read Lakewood last week, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was like super dark and interesting. So could you perhaps talk a bit about it?
Yeah, so Lakewood is about a young Black woman, Lena Johnson, and she's going to college. She's lived most of her life with only her mother and her grandmother, and they're all very, very close. And the book begins, and this isn't really a spoiler because it happens on page 1, but her grandmother is dead, and she finds out very quickly that she's now the support system. She's gone sort of from child to right away being the head of the family in some ways, because her mom has a chronic illness and she has to support her, as well as deal with all of the built up medical bills and funerary bills that come from, well, being alive in the United States. And I think some of the book comes from just like the frustration I have at health insurance at the United States. And it's tied a little bit into around the time right before I started this book, I had a family member go through just a big health scare where he was diagnosed with something that he probably would have died within a few years if the diagnosis had been correct. And we went to get him an MRI, and that basically wiped out our savings, even though we had insurance. And then we were kind of just waiting to find out what's wrong. And it seemed to be those few weeks where we're waiting to see what a specialist said and what everybody said. Like, how were we going to do this? How could we afford to keep him alive? Which, it's a terrible question like the cruelty of having to like have that conversation and also to figure out all the things that we would have to do. I don't know, it completely changed my life in some ways. And I didn't realize when I started writing Lakewood how much of like the emotional depths came from just those 2 months of my life that most people don't know about. We kept it very quiet, especially when it ended up nothing was wrong. It was just a misdiagnosis. Everything was fine. It was one of those things where you know what it's like writing or doing anything creative. You're working through emotional things that you don't even realize just changed you until maybe even years later when you can look at the creative thing, the writing, the art, and be like, oh, I'm so upset about this. I mean, maybe it's different for everyone, but at least for me, it seems like all of these things come on my writing that I'm not willing to understand or able to process. And then it takes finishing the thing to realize, oh, this is what I'm actually talking about.
No, I think that's very interesting because for me, I'm not too familiar with the American healthcare system because I live here in the Netherlands. And so for me, it was very interesting to see that in your novel, how you dealt with the topics of both race and class, and how the novel really showed how America as a society offers little to no help to people who are marginalized or have a disability or just are vulnerable, and then that the system can then go ahead and exploit them.
Yeah, I don't want to say, like, there are so many great things at times about living in the United States.
Of course.
But inequality, it's so woven into just our culture that a lot of people don't question it. We just say this is how life is here. And you kind of hear over and over, like, there are so many things that are great about this country. And there really truly are. But the way that we're kind of taught to not even consider inequality and how it happens in so many different structures, from our healthcare system to education to even where at times where you get to live, that it feels like the only way to write a novel about being alive in the United States right now is, in some way, it has to be driven by these inequalities. I mean, I guess I could write something about, I don't know, being rich and jet skiing, and which is also very American in some ways. But that's still about inequality. I mean, you don't have to think about anything but jet skiing. That's what rich people do, right? They just think about jet skiing and
skiing and going on their boats, drinking champagne.
Oh yeah, we love that. I mean, I'm not rich, but I'm just gonna say it. They love it.
I bet they do. The book sometimes notes things in history that occurred, such as the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Were these also the type of things that spurred you on to write this book?
Yeah, I ended up doing a lot of research about different research studies, and I wanted to think a lot about, oh, this is such a weird thing to say, that I wanted to think a lot about it. But there's also something about research studies lately with how they seem to still really be in a lot of people's imagination because of, like, Stranger Things and all sorts of these pop cultural touchstones, but they still are very white, and they've kind of become like this access to magic in a weird way. Mm-hmm. And the true story of them, at least in this country, is they're used to exploit the vulnerable. They're used, sure, that sometimes there are wonderful things that have come out of this, but it's still, the majority of these exploit vulnerable people. Anywhere from the health exams we currently get in the United States, I don't know if they're different elsewhere, but our knowledge of that is based on a horrible past. And even in the US today, in recent times, there have been reports of attempts at doing research studies on prisoners, ranging from just people in federal prisons and jails to even, like, the torture that's happened in Guantanamo Bay. For some human rights activists, they quantified that as a research study program because they're studying the different ways that torture will break a person. And I also think that on some level, sometimes just being a Black person in the United States, it can feel like you're in a research study. People are observing you. They are sometimes hyper aware of what you're doing. And then suddenly you're in a space that feels safe, and you kind of just keep going back and forth about, you doubt yourself sometimes, like, did I actually experience this thing? But it seems sometimes like people are just here to test your reactions. And I think that all kind of combined in my thinking over the different drafts, and it felt right to do a research study. And I mean, I also enrolled in some where the local optometry school, they do contact studies. And I ended up becoming friends with a lot of the doctors who do it, because once they heard I was writing a book, they were really excited to, please don't do that. Okay. Use us for a minute. She's pulling the curtains down.
I know.
But they were willing to talk a lot to me about like how a research study is ethically done, so I could actually learn like what is the right way to do these things, how are people treated with dignity and respect. I mean, Dr. Reed and Dr. Meyer always treat me with dignity and respect and kindness. I like them very much as people, but it's still trying to find all the different ways to understand this complicated thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's for me it was very interesting to learn about all these experiments as well, because the only contact I've ever had was basically at university. When you start off at university, they have like an introduction and a session, and there's always a stand there, people offering you money in order to join in all these experiments.
Yeah, that was part of my college experience too. And I remember a lot of my friends, because we were at kind of a wealthier school and didn't have much money, but there's a lot of talk. There was this research study where people were getting like saline injected, and it was measuring thresholds of pain, and it was supposed to be very painful, but you would get like $1,000. And so there was a lot of like hoping that you would get into it. I was too chicken, and also I didn't need $1,000 enough for that. But it was still like, should I do this?
But it's also scary in the sense that how they know exactly like which places to go to look for like the most suitable candidates. Like they really prey on like the most vulnerable. And like besides the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, your book also notes, for instance, Project Artichoke, which was crazy. I had never heard of it.
I hadn't heard of it until I did a draft, and then I want to say it was 2017 that the CIA released a ton of articles.
Yeah.
But they released a ton of redacted articles, and I spent just a lot of time reading through about different experiments, and it's
it's bonkers. Yeah. It's mad, really. Yeah. So in the novel as well, Lena, she and the other subject matter test people. They go through a multitude of experiments. They're all very different, but all also equally disturbing, in the sense like they get injected or they get like pills they don't know anything about. I was wondering, how did you come up with these experiments?
I think some of them are just motivated by, I don't know, maybe my kind of fear of just having a body in some ways, and thinking and trying to translate all the different ways that we're given medicine or told to do things just by healthcare in general, and how sometimes it just feels like a guessing game. So having a sense of, I think I drew a lot on my natural sense of this could work, but it might not, and then making it weirder and weirder as drafts went on.
Are there also like other pieces of work that really inspired you or informed you a lot with regards to the novel?
I made sure to read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
How was that experience?
Oh, I've cried so many times reading that book. And it was also it was a book I both had to read to understand things emotionally and sometimes just get to the root of it. And it was also kind of a book that I had to forget a little bit so that I wasn't recreating scenes or moments from it because it made such a big impact on me. I think one of the hardest things of writing a book sometimes is finding a way to read things and keep having a reading life, and also not letting those books kind of overwhelm or at least for me, it was like overwhelming my writing and creativity psyche, because there were some wonderful books I read that I had to kind of just stop and be like, it sounds like you're starting to imitate this person because you're in love with the book they're writing. Like I read Patty Yumi Cottrell's book, Sorry to Disrupt the Peace, while I was writing this. And have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
It's wild. It's about a woman who has mental health issues, and she's also an adoptee from Korea living in the Midwest. And the book is all in her point of view at first. So when she's having manic episodes, the prose mimics that form, and then it will cycle through different forms throughout the book. It's really hard to read in some ways because it is so close to the main character, but it's also was so, like, it really influenced how I understood how you could write a book where you distrust some of the things that are happening to a character but still feel empathy and try to be close to them.
Yeah, because also I noticed that as well with when reading your novel, in the sense that as the story sort of progresses, it's hard to kind of like put the pieces together, because you know also that there are parts of Lena's memory that are just wiped out and just completely gone. So it's like this huge puzzle that you have to try and find and figure out, basically.
Yeah, it's sometimes also hard for me to remember that because, like, I made myself a chart and I have all of these points and things that didn't make the book, and also just trying very hard to keep myself organized. And it was really hard too to choose, like, to do this. There are times where I really doubted whether or not that the book should. I feel like at times it's really hard to know what's real or what's fake, but I also thought that if I was writing a book about this and I made it extremely explicit, this is reality, it also, you would always feel like I'm sitting over your shoulder. I think it was a hard thing for me to choose to do for my first book, and there are times where I wish I could have made this decision for my, I think, second or third book if that happened. But it was also the book that ended up being my debut book. I don't have other books written. Well, I guess technically I have a short story collection, but that's a little more complicated with how publishing is. But for this one, it was just the book I was writing. My agent saw some of the pages my original agent, because I ended up switching agents during the process. She just retired from agenting, so someone else took me on at the house. It's not like this big
big scandal. No.
Yeah, it was more just things happen, but he'd also been working on the book a little bit, my current agent. And it was just the pages that they saw, and they saw a lot of potential for it. So they signed me before it was finished, and then I just kept writing and doing a lot of drafts that they were very patient about. And then this Lakewood happened.
So you were talking about this huge chart that you made Could you talk a bit about that more? How, like, did you plan everything out and then chose like what to use, or?
My agent would really like it if I would do that in the future, but I'm someone who just writes and writes and writes. And I think some of it is I just need to be surprised. If I'm not surprised or carried away by the story a little bit, it can feel like homework. And I mean, I like homework fine, but I don't want to spend my entire life feeling like, here's this busy work I have to do. And that's kind of how I feel sometimes when I chart out a story. But after I did a draft, my mentor for my MFA, what he has you do after drafts is you go through and you use Microsoft Word and you choose a color for different plot elements. So character development, moving the plot forward's a different color. If you're writing something that has like a mystery, which I guess mine sort of does and it doesn't, but there are still like elements that keep developing throughout. You chart that, and then you keep charting like other character stories too. And there are all different levels of things that you chart. And her recommendation is you go through the draft and you just mark each thing and start to look at like the progression throughout the book of all these different levels. And it's both kind of like a maddening exercise. And also it's really helpful because right away you can see, oh, I went on a 10-page tangent, which I probably wrote this at night when I just needed to write something, but this doesn't really do anything for anybody in the book, so it's got to go. And then you can start moving things around because you can see, oh, well, a lot of character things are happening here, but Lakewood's completely missing or the plot's completely gone. And that helped me a lot when drafting sometimes to just do these and then keep shifting things around over and over again.
So were there a lot of things that you eventually had to edit out?
Yes, definitely. In the process for me is I did a lot of editing. And then my agent, who is really good at editing, and he used to be an editor at Putnam, he read it, and then it was another round of, all right, take this thing out, write a new chapter here. And then my editor also wanted me to move a few things around. But it was also another thing where it was like, you need to write new chapters here because of pacing or trying to figure out just a few things.
How does your writing routine actually look like?
I don't really have a routine. I think one of the most freeing things for me is I've started to realize that writing isn't isolated. Writing is also reading. It's also sometimes knowing that you're not ready to write something, but having a friend to email or to take a walk with and say, can I talk at you? And then having someone in your life who's good enough to ask you the right questions or to push you toward like, well, why are you fixated on this thing? So it's not a thing for me where every day is 1,000 or 500 words, but it's something where at least an hour a day, one of those things is happening because all those feel things. I do, when I'm trying to get into a new work, I try to be a little more disciplined, where I'll write down my dreams, I'll write down images, I'll write notes about stories or books that I've read and why they've inspired me or made me think. And usually that process of engaging, not with like a big thing, but just making sure I'm clear that I'm observing and taking things in, it really gets my brain started on something new after a few weeks.
So I was also wondering about the characters in the book. Like, how did you decide on which characters to use for the experiments? Because they're all very different.
I knew that I wanted many different people, and some of it comes from working in an office, where working in an office is, sometimes I think you could read this book and write, Megan Giddings hates working in offices. Like, it's
I'm right there with you.
Like, I think it's clear that, like, a cubicle office lifestyle, I don't like it. I mean, I've had to do it a lot in my adult life. But it's kind of like that cast of characters you always get. Like, there's one person who's really cool and you like them. Someone who could be cool, but for whatever reason, you just don't connect. And then just a bunch of randoms who you're like, what are you doing?
I know exactly what you mean. The character who was always sitting next to Lena, Julie, I was really interested in her because she kept... Oh, I don't want to spoil anything, but... Is she inspired by anyone?
Not really. She's kind of a mixture of, like, many different types of personalities that you kind of get in a Midwestern office, where there's just a well-meaning older woman and she's decided that she's going to be your mentor in some way. And it's not just about work. All of a sudden, Judy wants to be in all of your life, even though she doesn't know you. She knows only who you are in the office. And I think for the average person, that's maybe 15% of their personality. But she's just the type of person who kind of latches onto that 15% and is like, you know what, I'm gonna make a difference in this person's life.
You need more oranges in your life.
Or when I was your age, I was already married. Or
Exactly. Yeah. So, what would you reckon was the hardest part during like the entire creative process of Lakewood?
I think it was just a very hard book to write emotionally. It's very dark, and by the end of each draft, I was kind of in a really big funk because I would be thinking about Lakewood all the time during the revision process. And it's just a place I don't really want to be. Oh, that doesn't sound like anyone's going to want to read it, but I think it's a kind of different thing where, like, if hopefully when you're reading it, because there are moments that are funny, there are moments that are weird. There's romance a little bit, but there's friendship and family. It's just really hard to, like, spend time with people, and even though you know they're not real.
Yeah.
But it still kind of hurts to do all of these things, or to have the creativity to have cruel and scary and frightening things happen.
Mm-hmm. And so, how did it feel eventually after like having finished the book?
It's such a strange feeling to finish a book. I'd finished books as like a teenager, but I had a really hard time letting go of it and not thinking about it. Like, I'm writing a new book now, and I started when the book went out, but it's still been really hard sometimes, especially because I do have to keep going back to Lakewood over and over again. And each time feels like another small, painful goodbye. Like, I'm excited to not think about it, but it was so much of my life for so long.
Mm-hmm. Because how long did it take eventually?
Overall, between starting it and then doing revisions with my editor, it was about a 5 years process. And I mean, I've had some short stories that I've worked on for longer, but it's completely different because that's just, you write it, it goes in a drawer. You write it, it goes in a drawer. It's not like this where I had to be there for a while in my brain to just make it come alive.
So are you looking most forward to when people eventually start reading?
I think the thing I'm looking forward to is I'm really excited to have readers take it seriously. Like, there are so many wonderful readers out there. And I know that the book is not perfect. I mean, I feel like writers are encouraged not to say that. But I mean, anything that a person makes is imperfect, and some of the beauty of it comes from its imperfections.
Yeah, that's
But
very true.
I'm really looking forward to hearing people's different point of views and ideas about it. Anything from I love it to, oh, but what if this had happened? But it's one of those things where it's going to be a little painful when I read someone's first, like, good idea where I'm like, oh, shit, that should have gone in the book. But it's also going to be its own strange delight to have someone say that and to have, like, loved and understood the book enough to have, like, their own ideas and thoughts about it that I'm a little jealous of. It's not going to be my own thing. So I'm really excited for that.
No, I can definitely imagine also being a bit nervous, like what everyone has to say about it. But I think in the end, like once you let go of it and hear people's different perspectives, that it's always going to be interesting, at least at the very least.
Yeah, I'm sure that when someone, because I don't allow myself to go on Goodreads,
Good job.
everyone around me has been like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
But I'm sure the first time that I get like a sense of someone just being like, this book was trash, it won't feel as good. But at the same time, you read the book and that's life. And it's also a book about a lot of difficult things. I'm sure that it's also a very strangely written book at times. So I think someone has to hate it. That's natural.
There's always going to be someone who doesn't like it. I mean, that's
That's
what
that's
that's us.
everything.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people
Yeah.
who don't like French fries. I mean,
What?
what? I'm sure there is someone right now saying I don't like French fries, and
Exactly.
yeah.
So now I have a couple of quickfire questions, if you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, so what was your favorite childhood book?
Um, do you mean like with illustrations, or do you mean like I'm a teen and I'm hiding alone in my room?
Like teen, primary school, like.
So primary school, I remember being obsessed with the Frog and Toad Are Friend books. Have you seen those?
No, I
They're about a
haven't.
frog and a toad. They're best friends. That's really it. But they like ride bikes. They eat ice cream on a porch. They have little fights, but they always by the end become best friends. Toad is impulsive and Frog is like his good, kind, caring friend.
That's so
It's
wholesome.
it was so wholesome, but I remember just being obsessed with those books. And I think that kind of led to me, though. I'm really interested in friendship and how I think what's really underrated in writing, and this might also be because it's a big part of my second book, and I've been thinking a lot about it, is that I want to read more books about friendship because I think it becomes the greatest romance of your life in some way to have someone, yeah, who just loves you and they don't have to have a whole life with you. That's really wholesome of me to say
No,
that.
no. No, I totally agree. I also have been thinking about this as well because I recently got a book sent to me called The Subtweet that was about friendship, and yeah, it's about two musicians who find each other on Twitter, but for me it was like really refreshing because it's like, okay, finally there's like no romance. Like it doesn't always have to be like I love you and you love me and we should be together, but just
Yeah.
friendship. And so, what do you consider to be perfect reading weather?
Um, I think the most perfect reading weather is it's about 8 at night, you've had a good dinner, and it's raining outside. And you don't have to go anywhere. No one has any expectations for you. And you get on the couch and you just start reading. And all you hear outside is just the rain coming down. And it's a little chilly so that you get to use your blanket. And then you read for hours and you realize it's midnight and you should have gone to bed because it's in the morning. But it's still like this perfect feeling that you were just in this reading bubble.
I know exactly what you mean. I love like reading to rain. So sometimes I'll just put on like a YouTube video, like 10 hours of rain, and it works.
Yeah. Oh, that I also do that to get ready for. I'm a pretty bad sleeper, so I sometimes do that for bed. Like, I put on the rain. I have to put it away from me because I can't have screens around me when it's a bad sleeping time. And I just try to listen to that and just lay completely still.
It's so cool. It's so cozy.
I love it. Also, snow's good, but it's not rain. Snow is good, but it's not rain.
Exactly. It doesn't have the same sound, not the same feel. So, who is your favorite writer?
I don't think I have a favorite writer. Although, should I have just said me? Should I?
Yes.
Too late for that. But I think it's hard to have a favorite writer because, at least when I was a younger writer, I'd find if I had a favorite writer, they would have too much influence on my writing or reading life. And then it kind of becomes like this dull copy of someone you really admire. But there are so many people who we're so lucky to be alive right now for books. I read the Mira Jacobs book, Good Talk, and I cried very hard. I'm currently reading The Yellow House by Sarah Broom, which is so good. There are so many writers, too, who just... I'm in a debut group for women of color writers, and all of our books are so different, and all of them are so good. Like, I've been very slowly reading The Eighth Girl by Maxine Chung, who is in the group when she sent me a galley. It is so scary and so interesting. And it's kind of like this delay of when people have been both very kind to you, but also they're geniuses and shouldn't, like, I don't know. It's wild to think that people are so good at this thing and so kind and friendly and warm.
That's so awesome.
That, yeah.
Has that group helped you a lot?
It's 90% of the time, it is the best thing that's happened to me this debut year.
Wow.
Where, like, we share a lot of information with each other. We sympathize with each other. Some of us, next week, we're going to an event, and we're going to get together and meet in person. And I mean, a few times, because we all also have the same anxieties, it can be like, I need to take a step back for a minute because I feel like every fear that I've been afraid to express is in this email, and I just...
need to step away.
Yeah.
What is your favorite genre to read?
Usually it's literary fiction, but lately, with my book coming out, I've gotten so much pleasure out of reading YA.
Oh,
where,
really?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just I've been so anxious that reading fiction that's in kind of the same range and field as me, it makes me a little stressed out, or it feels like work a little bit. And YA is bringing me, in poetry too, but YA especially, it's bringing me back to that, like, can stay late up at night reading, can be thinking about the characters all day and not be thinking, well, I would have done this, or they're so much better at this than me. Like, I can just be a reader.
That's so awesome. So which books have you been enjoying?
I have one more of these to go, but I recently binge read all of those Sherlock Holmes mysteries.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was so into them that, like, I really like mysteries, and I really like the Sherlock Holmes books. But hey, buddy. But I still didn't expect that I would just want to think and talk about these for weeks.
That's so cool. I have seen them around, but I'm always a bit scared with, like, retellings sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that was my feeling too, but I was like, you know what? I just want to read a bunch of YA trilogies. And a lot of people said that these would surprise me. And they did. She's really good. I can't remember the author's name, but she's so good at structuring novels, and especially chapters too, where it makes me just keep. She's like potato chips. Like you just keep going. Or like the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy.
Oh, from Jenny Han.
Yeah, and I read all of those. Now I'm looking forward to the movie. Like they're just really fun, and there's something about how emotional that YA novels get to be. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, sometimes it's really tiring to read a book, and I'm not encouraged to feel anything but like despair or ennui, and to like have the highs and lows of being a teenager again. I love that feeling. I mean, I hated it when I was a teen, but now.
Now once like you've passed that phase, it's like it's okay to read about that again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel the same way about that. Because I for a long time didn't read YA, and then I got back into it since I started doing like booktube and stuff, and it's been just really fun to read. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're so good at just making you want to keep turning the pages. I think there's kind of this idea with books written for adults that adults have, I don't know, the willpower. Like if they're going to read the book, you don't have to end the chapter in a way that makes you turn the page sometimes. But in a YA novel, they are always entering on either like a big feeling or an event that I'm like, oh, I have to know what happens next.
The book that made me feel like that the most last year was Pet by Quake and Mizzy. Have you read
That's
that one?
That's my next one. Yes.
Oh, that's so exciting. I don't want to say it, but I think you are going to love it. It's so good. Like their writing is phenomenal. I loved it so much. It's so
okay.
It's so
I can't wait.
Yeah. Please tell me what you think of it.
I'll email you when I read it.
Great. So the next question is, what was your favorite book you read last year?
Ooh, this is so hard to pick. As I read Electric Arches by Eve Ewing, and it's a poetry book, and it's so good. Is it Electric Arches?
It's the one with the black girl on the
and she's
cover.
And it's like this striking image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's so good, and I ended up actually buying a copy for one of my students to give to because she liked it so much. Some of the poems I taught, but it's such a good book, and it's a mixture, a little bit of poetry and prose to me because it's so narrative. I loved it.
Which book are you most looking forward to this year?
One that I've read, and just so that everyone has read it, so that I can have a ton of people talk to about it, is How Much of These Hills Is Gold.
Ooh, yes.
It's by my friend Pam, and it's so cool. Great. And then I really want to read the new Britt Bennett so badly.
I don't know Britt Bennett, which...
She wrote The Mothers.
Oh yes, I think Caroline Zhang can also. I spoke to her last week, and she also was anticipating this book.
It sounds so good. I think it's coming out in June, and it's like it's one of those books by someone I don't know, but I really liked her first book, and it was kind of one of those moments where like I'll read anything by her. And I also really like Catherine Lacey's writing, and her new book sounds really weird. It's called Pew, and it comes out in the summer. I don't even entirely understand what it's all about, because it seems to be about a nameless narrator, and it seems to be about religion, but also being a person. Have you read any of her books?
No, I haven't.
Her books they're the type of books where I don't know if the plot entirely matters to me when I read them, because she's so good at thinking about being alive, and especially being angry or feeling a little lost, that her writing just is so forceful to me and interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's lovely. I have one. Oh no, I have two. Still, sorry, it's taking me so long.
No.
Okay. I have. Okay, the next question is, what's the best writing advice you were ever given?
The best writing advice I think I was ever given. Oh, I don't know if this is the best, but it stuck with me and really sustained me. Is when I was 20, I had this idea that I was going to be a poet, and I was doing just a lot of poetry workshops and had like a class where I met one-on-one with the professor. And we would meet every week, and I would bring him 4 poems. And then I started writing fiction, and he was like, well, your fiction is better.
Oh.
And it wasn't that he thought I was a bad poet. He was just like, your fiction, you're alive with it. You have so many things you want to talk about and say. And then he said, but fiction writers don't get good until they've lived a little bit. You might get lucky and have things that happen really fast for you. But he was just like, especially for fiction, if you're patient and take your time, it will and make space for your writing as much as you can in your life. You have to be patient. And I think about that a lot because I'm a naturally impatient person. So it's also very good life advice. But it is so much of writing fiction. It's about patience. It's so hard to be patient and thoughtful when you're having fun, but you have to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I can't even imagine writing a novel. I myself am very impatient as well, so just writing a couple of paragraphs, I'm like, okay, when will this thing be done?
I mean, that does not go away, but I mean, it's also why I don't outline, because getting to say, well, what happens next? It makes it so that I'm not impatient for the finished thing, but I'm impatient to be surprised, to be in the story. And it's helped. But
So did you switch to that, or did you always just like write in that way?
I've always liked writing that way. I've, like, the biggest concession I think I've made to writing a different way is for the current book I have, I've written down all the like major plot points I want to have happen on different note cards. And then sometimes I move them around just so I can think about like the structure and what's happening. But I mean, I still don't think most people would call that an outline.
You know, you have some people who like start typing and they already know what's going to happen.
I have, oh my God, I have a student, I teach lifelong learning. She's a beautiful writer, but she's one of those people who has a comprehensive outline of everything she writes, down to like, she has a 3-act structure of her book. It's 30 chapters, 10 in each. And then she's written down every single thing that happens in each chapter. And I was like, how do you know this? How do you?
That's impressive.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot from her. And I think I'm driving her a little nuts. So I'm like, I'm just going to do my own thing.
The last quick fire question is, if you had to create a conspiracy theory, what would the name be and what would it entail?
Project Oak Tree.
Oak tree.
That was a thing where I just like looked around the room and was like, oak tree. But it's Project Oak Tree. And what was I? Every once in a while, when I'm joking around now, I do come up with conspiracy theories like, oh, what if, like, this is what's really happening. It's also, I grew up in a small town that Lakewood was modeled on a little bit. And kind of one of the things I grew up hearing is that, like, there was just this natural distrust of the government. And so, like, the river that ran through town was polluted, not by the government, but because it's Michigan and there weren't a lot of regulations on the auto industry and different companies. So, of course, it's polluted now because no one was telling them not to, and they got away with it. Cynical, but also true. But so it's kind of like that natural thing where a lot of people I know from that area will say this, like, conspiracy theory that the government did it. They didn't do it. But it's still like, it's kind of built into the DNA of people around them. There's some people who feel very differently, but a lot of people, I grew up hearing, like, adults say things like that and getting, like, really excited. Like, really? For a while, one of the weird conspiracy theories, it's a joke. I don't actually believe this. Okay. But also, don't cut it to make me say I believe this. That's a conspiracy theory. I used to say that aliens were always here, and what we say are ghosts are aliens, and, like, that feeling. And the idea was that, like, the aliens are here, but we can't see them because they're on a different light spectrum than us. Oh. The U.S. government knows they're here, but we just can't see them. Then I saw something in the news, like, last week that claimed that, and I was like, yes.
Whoa.
I don't... Yeah, I was like, I did this.
Maybe the government is just listening to you and trying to find all these conspiracy theories, all these ideas.
Do you see on Twitter, like, the recurring joke from people in the U.S. sometimes about, like, the FBI agent or the NSA agent who monitors them?
Oh, yeah.
And I've been joking about that since the start of writing this book, that, like, my NSA agent is like, Megan, don't do this, whenever I'm, like, typing something bad. So I find those jokes really funny. Or, like, they're watching this conversation right now and being like, good job, Megan. You're just being yourself.
Yes.
Love you.
You got us there, like, eating popcorn, listening to us. The last question is, apart from reading a good story, what would you hope that people will take away from Lakewood?
I kind of hope that they'll let Black writers and all writers of color, this is so optimistic, but let us make new stories. Like, I don't want to write about slavery. I mean, there is some oppression and racism and systemic harm in my book, but it's also, there's not really that straight of a line between things that are happening in the U.S. Like, I wanted to write an imaginative world that's based on the world we live in. And I found it was really hard to find a lot of comp titles people are still having a hard time saying what genre my book is. Is it dystopian? Is it a thriller? Is it speculative? And I'm hoping that people who can make decisions about this will read my book and think, I want to be the editor of a book like this. I want to make more spaces for women and non-binary, well, all people of color. I won't exclude men either, but to make spaces so that we don't have to write about just real life. We can keep being imaginative. The movie Get Out gets referenced a lot lately with my book, and I really like the comparison, but it's also still kind of frustrating because where's the book? Where's the book version of Get Out that people could be referencing to sell this book? And I'm hoping that, I don't have high hopes that a ton of people are going to buy my book, although thank you for everybody who does. But I do hope that it will inspire other people to write and see like, oh, well, this weird book is out here. Here's a comp title. Here's a way that I can validate that someone at least out there will buy a book like this book that I'm writing and make space so that we can have like, so we could have like a whole new world of speculative and dystopian and horror writers of color. We just have to let people open the doors a little bit for us to do it.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm hoping for as well, because that is something that I've always like wanted to see as well. In the sense, like for instance, I really love horror, and where do you quickly go to? You go to like Stephen King and all those types of people. And last year during Halloween, I wanted to do a like this nice project focusing on people of color within horror, and it was so incredibly hard finding work, specifically like work that wasn't about slavery, like so hard.
Oh, there's a book coming out next year, I think. I mean, you know how book publishing is, but it just got announced, and it's by LaTanya McQueen, and it is listed as literary horror, and it sounds so good. I mean, there's a little bit of slavery in it because it involves like a Black woman who has to go to a plantation for a wedding, because a lot of people still have weddings on plantations. But then like things happen like ghosts and stuff. It sounds so good. And I'm really excited that like people are buying and like releasing these books.
That was the last question. So well, those were all of the questions. Megan, thank you so much for coming on. I had such a fun time talking to you.
I had fun talking to you. This was great. And thank you so much for recommending those books to me.
It's my pleasure, and I'll be taking those recommendations from you as well. Well, that's everything for today's episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye. A huge thank you to Barbara, Chris, Diane, Jen, Nikolai, and Tara for supporting me over on Patreon.